Hi, everyone.
Thank you for that reminder, Carrie.
My pleasure, my pleasure. So for the recording's sake, for those people who didn't get to make it, my name's Carrie Grubin. I'm the project director for SMPTE's Rapid Industry Solutions initiative. The first area of focus is on-set virtual production. And just a little bit of background about me. I've been in media and entertainment for my entire career. I have done everything from being in an editorial room as an apprentice and assistant editor with trim bins and syncing dailies and all of that. Starting my career, I've worked for 2 major studios, most recently the Walt Disney Company. I was vice president of mastering and studio operations. I've owned my own post-production facility, worked for a major vendor, and even took a stint in cybersecurity for a couple of years, focusing on media and entertainment. And for the last year, I've been working with SMPTE. I'm an active member. I've been for many, many years. I was approached by Barbara Lang to say, hey, SMPTE is part of our growth and looking at how we can better serve our constituents. We want to understand the needs of the market. And first area, because we know it's a really hot topic, we'd like to focus on on-set virtual production. So I'm going to share my screen here, just kind of start off with this. And I did over 30 interviews last February and March. It was across the globe, so we made sure that it captured the full kind of SMPTE membership and the whole world as far as what was needed. And we also ensured that we weren't taking it from one specific focus, like the Hollywood perspective of creative content storytelling. We wanted to look at broadcast, we wanted to look at education and how the needs were. And I got some really interesting feedback, not only about where the industry needs were, but also too about SMPTE in general and how the opportunities for growth and being supportive as we move into SMPTE's second century now, right? So what the industry needed in the area for virtual production, specifically on set, was training and education and enabling systems interoperability. There are so many existing educational offerings that you can find on the internet, but they're very specific to the content creators who made it. So if you want to learn about Unreal, Epic and Unreal has amazing content to look at, as does Unity, as does Disguise, as you know, you name your piece in the ecosystem and they have the training. But there was a lot of there wasn't a lot of information tying it all together. And as part of that, we wanted to be able to build the education and training around giving some democratization to the content. And we also had to figure out, like, there are not enough people who understand how to do this. And I'm sure all of you, depending on your role, have run into that. Either you're someone who wants to learn more about this area, or you're someone trying to hire the people who understand game engines, understand how it translates to using these tools on set. And then separately, we had, you know, our equipment manufacturer saying, tell us just how to plug in. Is this really an HDMI situation, or could we come up with something that would be more robust, maybe related to ST2110 or something of that nature? And, you know, this is a really fastly evolving technology. So the review model for standards and making information available really needs to be different. It's software based. We need to do things faster. And oh, by the way, you know, it'd be great if we could just actually create this information and push it out to a broader audience and make it available at no charge to the end users. And from all of this feedback and information, we came up with the new initiative, Rapid Industry Solutions, which is basically exactly what it says. It provides a neutral, non-commercial platform to facilitate these rapid solutions in the areas of focus. We wanted to make sure we were accountable to what the industry needed. So we've formed an industry advisory group, and SMPTE is accountable to that advisory group. So that advisory group needed to be robust across all areas of the ecosystem and to hold SMPTE accountable. That was a very, very important aspect. And SMPTE, people told us, you know, SMPTE does so many things really, really well. Focus on the things you're really, really good at. So that's education and the interoperability part. Don't reinvent what other standards bodies or professional organizations have done. There's amazing work being done across the globe by the EBU, by Movie Labs, the Academy Software Foundation, by VES, and so forth. But build the way so that we can stitch it together and be able to tell the full story. And then moving forward in the future, how does this evolve and change SMPTE's business model? How can we sponsor the work up front so that we can give away the deliverables at no charge? And we'll talk about some of those deliverables and what they look like, as well as actually, then making the information available to a much broader audience. There's a challenge sometimes, as many of you probably are aware, that when you're charging for a standard, not everybody's going to adopt it because maybe they can't afford to adopt it. So how can we fund the work up front? So in theory, we can give away any standards work that we create around this ecosystem available to the industry at large, at no charge. So I've jumped ahead a little bit there. So that's part of what we're doing. And not everything needs to be a standard. Again, when things are evolving so quickly, we want to be able to explore, well, if maybe something needs to be a recommendation, a recommended practice, maybe like an RGD, maybe something needs to be just example workflows or best practices as opposed to just standards. So how do we expand what it means as outputs for SMPTE to make information available? So this is the current list of our advisory group members. We are, and I see that it's actually 58 advisory group members, not 5. So we'll get that fixed before we share this with everybody. As you can see, it really runs the gamut of educational institutions, professional organizations, some names which are very, very well known to the SMPTE environment, but also too, everyone that's circled in purple here are new to SMPTE. They never were involved for one reason or another, whether that be that they just weren't aware of SMPTE and what it does, or that they just didn't feel like they had a place. So we've been able to create a space and an inclusive way to bring all of these players together. And we have been very, very busy over the last almost year doing a lot of work. So that advisory group I mentioned with those 58 participants, which actually equals about 160 people, believe it or not. We have a basic overview meeting monthly. Those were started in August. And that's where we go over the top issues of concern and we provide updates on the specific work being done by the work streams. So we form 3 work streams based on the feedback of education and training and interoperability. So we have the education work stream, the interoperability work stream, that also includes a subgroup right now on camera metadata. I'll talk about that in a minute, as well as an outreach work stream. Originally, outreach was its own entity. It sat to the side, but what we found over the first few months is really all of these initiatives are very, very closely bound together. There's a lot of crossover. So we embedded people from outreach into those other work streams so that we can rapidly get information out, or if there's ideas of things that need to be addressed, we can actually start to push out that information and provide those opportunities much faster than we would if they were a separate entity. So I'm going to go through interoperability first. This is not the typical order I do it, but we're going to show some information in a little bit here. There were 5 big buckets that were identified through our research and our surveys of our advisory group members that we really needed to be addressed. These are really broad, as you can tell, but on set, the whole workflow process of being able to move data and connect systems. The camera, that source of truth, that's if you're actually capturing images with a camera. You could be capturing it just as game engine materials or backplates, but you're going to be combining it with something at some point. So understanding how the first place that's capturing that image to go through the pipeline on a virtual set is the camera. The overall ecosystem, which is that connectivity and the data and asset management side. File formats. Through the research, we found that there are more than 300 graphics programs, much more than that, and more than half of them are proprietary. So how do we either identify some target file formats to simplify people being able to utilize the tools, or how do we create, again, a way to create some sort of transform to an interoperable format so that you can move easily in and out and understand the characteristics of what you're using. And then color science. Color science is the bedrock of what SMPTE's done the whole time. So what can we do about actually calibration tools, framing charts, making sure that when someone gets on set, they understand, all right, well, if I'm using this to be a creative storytelling capture, and I want it to have the widest dynamic range, I want to have something that where my LED walls and my capture is like in OpenEXR, as wide as you can possibly get it. So what you might see on your LED volume is going to look really flat and washed out, right? But it's going to give the most dynamic range. Compare that to what a broadcaster is going to need. Broadcasters might need it to be HDR ready out of the camera. I mean, think about a sports broadcast. If you're trying to replicate someone being on the soccer pitch and have a correspondent on a virtual set looking like they're there, you're going to need to ensure that you're capturing so that you've got, you know, dynamic image coming off of that LED volume. But it even goes beyond that. It goes into things like LED walls, emissive displays. What is the missing color spectrum in the signal that's coming out? So all of those types of areas are covered in that color science process. So the interoperability workstream has come up with some specific initiatives. This is the timeline that they're working towards for 2022. And it is in those big buckets we've talked about. So the camera sources and metadata subcommittee that meets twice a month. It's being led by Jim Hellman at Movie Labs, but there's quite a few. We've got 4 or 5 lens manufacturers, camera manufacturers, and other people who are highly versed in camera and lens metadata. The ASC is a partner within RIS, and they are specifically looking at what are the required pieces of metadata to come from the lens and the camera that it doesn't matter what each individual manufacturer calls it, because we know that manufacturers call things by different names, but what are the categories so that we can start to build a cipher or transform so that when you get the information out, at least you can put it into an understandable format to know, okay, if I'm using a red camera or black magic camera, I know they may call it differently, but this line 25, line 30 of this database is always, or this container is always going to have this information. So think of like focal length or whatever characteristic you want to name off. There's so many. There's also work again on that onset. We're working closely with groups like the Academy Software Foundation on the file formats. They're doing specific work on USD, which was a file format that was created actually by the folks at Pixar as a potential one of these interoperable formats. And we will follow their work and then hopefully bring it into what we're doing. We have several RDDs for those of you who are active SMPTE members in flight that relate to that. And we're exploring if the information that is there makes sense. Do we work within the SMPTE organization and in partnership with standards to push those RDDs out at no charge? And then if we need to, from the sponsorship funds that we have, replace the revenue that was originally expected, we can do that. That's some of the flexibility that we have. From the best practices area, and I'll show you the wall chart in a minute. We're like, what is the quick start guide? Like if you could go, if you're getting into this, what are the tools that you need right away? All right, well, you need calibration tools. You might need other measurements, framing charts, information on frame rates, or even just some workflow diagrams to refer to. So you could say, oh, this kind of resembles what I want to do, or here's 2 or 3 options of ways to put it together. We want to build that as part of some of the offering. And again, as I've talked about, everyone works very closely together with other work streams, and they're working very closely with education, because putting out this information without ways to explain it misses part of the needs of the industry. You have to be able to help users understand what you are providing as information. And then, some of these things like are further down the pipeline that are going to take longer. So what can we do from connectivity and moving data around faster, including potentially expanding ST2110? And how do we make sure that that connectivity or other types of connectivity are stable and provide a real solution for cameras and pushing it throughout the full onset pipeline, as well as leveraging tools like the cloud and others. So very, very busy committee, a lot of amazing work. We're also seeing how that will tie into the standards community. From the outreach perspective, it's like what we're doing today. So looking at the first kind of full quarter of the year, we had 4 presentations in February around the globe. As you can see, we supported the London virtual production workshop for SMPTE. We also had actually a recording that was done originally for IBC in December, which didn't happen. So they released that in February. There was a presentation to the European Broadcast Union. And then on February 22nd, the Hollywood Professional Association Technology Retreat, which I happen to be a board member of the HPA. We held our technology retreat in super session, and I chaired that with Eric Weaver from the ETC. And we actually had 3 fully functioning volumes in Palm Desert, where we were able to walk through and give insights and a bit of space for people to come explore. It's great to talk about these volumes, but not everybody has the chance either geographically to see one or to be able to just get to one, because they're being used pretty significantly. And then for March and April, I've spoken to several chapters, including the Toronto chapter, the New York chapter, and again, I apologize there. It's actually Women in Media. It was a great panel with Lux Machina and Women in Media, where we talked about RIS, but also about the actual pipeline. And then on April 26th at NAB in Las Vegas, we have several of our Rapid Industry Solutions Advisory Group members who are speaking on April 26th, talking about different things. And so as you can see, it's pushing out information so that it's available. And we, through these presentations, you may hear of educational institutions or other groups or other companies, even your own, that might be interested in joining. So it's about having the ability to share that information and make it accessible as wide as we can. And we're looking forward to partnerships further out. CGRAPH is, for those of you familiar with it, very, very important organization in the file side and gaming and that creative content creation portion. Building a bridge with them. We're actually hoping there's a new event they're doing for educators in May that we're offering to program a whole section on if they would like. And then we've presented about 3 panels ideas to their submission committee for their conference, which takes place in August in Vancouver. And then beyond that, we have IBC, which we did one small presentation for this past year, but also the SMPTE Media Technology Summit, formerly known as the Annual Tech Conference. The Media Technology Summit, we actually just got approval. We are going to be running a full section on rapid industry solutions and some practical hands-on learning opportunities at the show. So if you're coming to the show and this is something you're interested in, we're going to have programming where you'll have some learning requirements ahead before you go. And then when you get there, you'll have opportunities for some hands-on learning. And we're very much in the infancy with that, but we're very, very excited to be able to actually be able to supply that. So I see here someone had asked Craig here about the timeline was flagged as SMPTE confidential. This is something that amongst SMPTE members will make this available. The information on the timelines is meant for the advisory group, but nothing is secret here, Craig. So certainly, if that's something within your company or other members that you think they would like to know about it, it's more kind of for a just so people know that this is coming from SMPTE meetings. So so if there's further questions on that, we can talk about that afterwards. But thank you for the question. On the educational side, and again, here's another one because this comes from, these are slides that we present monthly at the advisory group meeting as well. So the education work stream, we've talked a bit about what we're going to be doing for this, for the actual Media Technology Summit. So that will start to be formed, and probably over the summers when those classes are going to start. But part of that work is also looking at what was needed from the key objectives and the feedback on education. So the big areas, we're taking all of that existing information we talked about earlier with that's created by specific manufacturers or by specific groups, and bringing it all together so that as someone new and trying to understand onset virtual production, or even as a working at a studio, or you're working in the industry and you're like, I just need to kind of start to find out what exactly is involved with virtual art department. Rather than having to search all over the web, we're trying to collate and bring as much information together so that it is easily accessible. So we're in the process right now of doing that curation. We don't only take suggestions from inside of our advisory group. We take suggestions in theory from anybody. So there's actually a link on this presentation if you wanted to provide that. And we have some students from universities going through to help us with metadata tagging and seeing how robust it is. And from that point, we actually take that information and we'll start to curate that and make it available as part of our interactive platform that we're developing. In addition, we do co-programming, which we talked about in partnership with Outreach and with the Education Department within SMPTE. We are creating this interactive platform I mentioned, which I'll show you a video, introductory video about here in a moment of where it started. And then going through and making that missing educational content, that connective tissue that is needed so that a full story can be told along with understanding really specific areas. One other thing that was very important to our education work stream was providing access to tools and information for students. And students you can use loosely. It's not just about university students, it would be professional students as well. And within that, we're actually developing a resource grant program where we can match up those institutions in need of equipment, services, subject matter expertise with companies that want to provide it. And that is probably going to start as a pilot program here very soon, so that we can launch the official grant program at the Media Technology Summit. So very, very excited about that. So I kept referring to these deliverables and making things available for free. So to give you, the first thing we pushed out was our wall chart, our onset virtual production wall chart. You probably have already seen this if you're a SMPTE member. It's something that we brought together many, many thought leaders to put it together. It was important. We understood that everybody speaks a different language in this space. So we actually made sure to use some of those existing tools. So the visual language for media creation from Movie Labs, we actually leveraged that as a tool, and it was the first time it was used publicly to create something so that everybody knew the shapes and the boxes and what we were trying to refer to. Because wherever we can use common language, we simplify our understanding and start to bring everyone to the same level. In addition, not only is it buckets of areas, and this isn't the only type of virtual production that can happen. This is an example of one setup, but we also wanted to make sure that we included information on the skills and knowledge base required, so that if you say we're a production designer, that you could see where you need to fit in, or where you need to add your skill sets and so forth. So it was important to be able to not only talk about the actual parts of the work, but how people's jobs and how their responsibilities are going to change over time. It's a dynamic, living, breathing document. This is in theory B1, so you can see there's a QR code on the upper left. And we've already put an updated version up on the website. And as part of that, we realized as we were working on this that we understood what we were talking about, but how do you make sure to make it accessible to everyone? And so we made a companion video, which I'm going to play for you here, so that it goes over the idea for the wall chart and what its future is going to be as an interactive platform. So I am going to actually stop my share, and I'm going to share another screen here, and we'll watch the video.
As you all know, the media
All right. Well,
Carrie,
yes.
unfortunately, and since you were running it in full screen mode, you didn't realize it. No one had audio.
Oh, no. Oh, I am so sorry, everybody.
What we will do is make sure we send the link out so that everyone can actually access it online and
Great.
take a look at it, because it is a really good video with a really good overview of some of the work that has been done.
Oh, man, I am so sorry about that, everyone.
We did
Oh.
test it beforehand and it worked just fine.
It did. My apologies, everybody. So yes, we'll make sure that that gets out to you. And because I wasn't running in full screen, I did not see the chat. So again, my sincerest apologies. All right, so we'll go back to the actual kind of presentation here. Yeah, I do encourage you, especially if you're talking to clients or coworkers or employees who are trying to understand this. The resource of the wall chart and talking about this, it gets used all of the time across our advisory group members, because it's a good place just to get everybody like acclimated. And we've had a lot of success. Ironically, we were trying to pull some data about how many times it had been downloaded, but the way it was originally set up, we couldn't. But we have a lot of, quite a bit of anecdotal information about people leveraging this with their clients. So again, this is for free. This is something that RIS paid for. It was developed by all the people who you saw but could not hear on the video, and it worked. It's a very, very great resource. So going on, one big question that comes up a lot is, well, what does this mean for standards? Are you trying to get rid of standards? And the answer is absolutely not. This is a way to actually, in theory, make the standards process more proactive. As many of you know, with standards, usually what will happen is someone from the industry comes to Cynthia and says, hey, we've been working on this, or hey, we're having a real problem. We need a standard around this. And then that gears up all of the machinations and the new, whatever processes that need to happen with the standards community to be able to work on something. And what we realize is by bringing together all these subject matter experts, users and manufacturers in one place around a particular initiative, we have this really unique opportunity to identify things early and be proactive, because we have many people who are participating in RIS who are actually in the standards community, along with a lot, again, that are completely new, and they're discussing where these issues are. And so that gives us this really great insight. And in fact, we're working right now with the standards community to talk about how we officially create that that pathway to be able to move information from what RIS is identifying through meetings into standards where it's appropriate. Now, again, not everything is a standard and not everything requires the rigor. So those are also some of the discussions happening about, okay, how do we make sure that we use the skill set and the discipline of standards where it's appropriate, and then apply different sets of requirements and use that where maybe use something different where it isn't appropriate. But we're in that process of doing the documentation, having these discussions. You know, we talked about what the camera and lens metadata team is doing. And then as we are ready, we're pushing things over the fence. And in fact, we're probably going to start a pilot here pretty soon with one of the areas to actually see, okay, so how does that work? And then learn what, you know, keep the parts that work really well, and then make the changes where perhaps there is areas that we stumble or we have a challenge. Florian Schleich gave a great presentation to not only the standards community, but to the entire advisory group. And for those of you who have been involved, you know that agreeing on the requirements is the difficult, time-consuming part. But then when you get everybody together and you have that, you can actually push forward with the standards process, you know, as long as you're following the due process and the testing pretty quickly. We make an analogy to kind of the creation of the vaccine, where when you remove some of the obstacles in the pipeline so that you can proceed more effectively and more efficiently, we want to borrow from that methodology to see where we can remove obstacles to actually make the standards process where appropriate move faster. It's not going to be always, but in certain cases, definitely we can make it move faster. So if you want to know more about RIS, you can contact me directly. You can contact your local chapter leadership. You can visit the SMPTE website and landing page, which is here, to actually see what is what's going on and what new has been posted. That's where that wall chart is available, as along with the video where you can listen to it. And then there's also a general project management email address that goes to everybody. So if you're not sure who you should talk to, like, oh, you know, we're already members, how do we get involved? Or I'm an individual contributor. If you're not sure who to send it to, you can send it to the general project management email, and then the right person will you know, get in contact with you. So plenty of ways to find out how to actually get in touch with us. And then I'd like to open it up to some questions and see what I can answer. And if you want me to go back and explain anything of what you saw on the wall chart, I'm happy to do that as well. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Carrie. That was wonderful and a really good overview. I guess I'll kick off questions here until we see if somebody else drops one in. What lessons have been learned maybe in this, you know, first several months of RIS being in existence? Any good things, bad things, things that need to change, things that maybe people who were participating didn't expect?
Yeah, that's a really, really good question. I will say we iterate and change our approach quite a bit based on the feedback that we get, because, you know, we tried to enter this from the perspective of we don't know what we don't know. It's something very, very new. So as an example, we do find that depending upon how much familiarity you have with SMPTE and how you've been involved, there are things that are different that you maybe aren't expecting as being part of how SMPTE normally operates. We were really challenged through the interview process to, like, SMPTE's too slow. We need to go faster. So we're like, okay, we hear you loud and clear. Let's start to exercise that. We want to be able to push out the information for free. Well, then what does that mean, you know, as far as revenue goes, or okay, well, that requires fundraising at the front end. So our participants, as an example, pay, in addition to their membership, they pay some sponsorship funds based on the size of the organization. If they're for profit, nonprofits and educational institutions provide insights and, you know, actual work on the committees, as well as part of how they fund RIS. But the other thing we found is, because of that, companies, it is a business. There has to be value on all sides. So we are trying to remain accountable to those advisory group members, whether they're paying or not. And so there is a push to keep things moving. That's why they have people like me. The funding part of it goes to pay for me to be able to direct the project and to spend hours working on it, when volunteers who have a day job may not be able to spend time on it. So if you're accustomed to being in SMPTE and watching kind of how the process of standards rolls through, or work rolls through, this is a different type of push. It's more along the lines of what you would do if you were, again, sponsoring and expecting a deliverable. So, so we learned that we have to be more transparent about that, so that people have an understanding of what to expect when they participate. We're also learning that, you know, depending upon where you sit in the technology ecosystem, we need to be transparent if the specific area you're involved with isn't something we're dealing with in the here and now. So as an example, interoperability is working very hard right now on the lens and camera metadata. And so it doesn't mean we aren't thinking about and working with the LED volume manufacturers or cloud companies. So helping to provide a way for everyone who is maybe not on that specific point of focus to know that they still have a seat at the table, and where that value comes from for them is something that we have recognized about again, this transparency to be able to provide that information. And then finally, the power of the education side. As part of this resource grant that we are developing, there has to be a value within SMPTE and then with universities to have a student chapter. It takes someone willing to step up to be that advisor within the university to support students. And it's really important if you're trying to help your students grow and then as a company have access to potential future employees. So we wanted to make sure that we were pairing up, and this becomes an incentive to become a student chapter, because then you have access as part of this resource grant that you get first chance to be able to apply for these resource grants. So it becomes, again, there's a reason to be involved and put in the time for your students, because you have the opportunity to have access to something that you wouldn't normally have access to. So those are just some of the examples, and we evaluate every time. So that's why we do a lot of pilots. You're hearing me talk about a lot of pilots. So pilot with how we're going to do the resource grant so that we can work through the kinks and then keep the processes that work really well, and then get rid of the processes that don't, or make changes. Again, we'll try with the educational process at the Media Technology Summit. We're going to see everything that really speaks to our constituents. And then as we take that model and move it to other geographic locations, we'll look at what was successful and keep that, but then also really pay attention to what maybe we missed the mark on and what we need to adjust.
Okay, that's a lot.
Yeah. It's been very, very busy, a big learning experience, but it's not your, it's not SMPTE from the 1950s, because we're not living in that world anymore. It's not that we have physical media, physical film or cables that work the same way as now. We have a very dynamic technical ecosystem now, and we have to rise to the occasion.
Okay. All right. Does anyone else have any other questions before we get ready to end the meeting here? Not seeing anything coming in on the chat. Well, Carrie, thank you very much for doing this overview. We will absolutely get the link sent out to the video so people can watch it on their own. It was only 8 minutes, so it won't be too bad watching it again. Do want to thank those of you who participated today. The next meeting is tentatively scheduled for May, and I believe it's looking to be May 9th, which is the second Monday in May. We are hopeful that it will be an in-person meeting, although we are still trying to find a location where we can meet, and it will be our NAB wrap-up. So a couple of weeks following NAB, all the new and exciting things that were there at the show. So we hope everyone will be able to join us, especially if it is in person. Carrie, thank you once again. Thanks everyone else. And we appreciate it. We'll see you next month.